Good evening and welcome. I'm Roy Blitzer, and our show is Ask Dr. Business. The purpose of our time together is to provide information and insight that will help make your working life more enjoyable. The desired outcome is you'll take the input and the advice, and things will be much better for you, and you will be more satisfied on the job. We are continuing our series on first jobs, and we're very fortunate this evening to have Sara Hart with us, who as an individual is both a consultant, a coach, an author, and a speaker. And she's going to talk a little bit about her career and how she learned and what she didn't learn from her first position. Welcome.
Thank you, Roy.
I'd like you, if you would, please tell our audience a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up? What did you study in school? And how did you get to be what you are now?
I was born and grew up in a very small town in southern Ohio called New Carlisle. And I spent my first 18 years there. From there, I went to Ohio University and got a BFA, and then went from there to Northwestern University and got a master's and a PhD.
In?
Group communication.
Ah, okay, good.
Yep.
Now tell us about your career. You probably had lots of wonderful jobs. We'll get to the first one after we hear the kinds of things you've done.
Right. My jobs, well, like a lot of us, I was a babysitter, and then I was a candy wrapper. And not a candy wrapper, I wrapped candy. I was not a candy wrapper. I weighed trucks for my father at a grain elevator. I sold clothes for many seasons during the summer and in holidays in a department store. My first, quote, real job was...
We'll call that your first professional job.
My first professional job, right. My first professional job was as an assistant professor at the Queens College in the City University of New York.
Well, while we're stopping there, I want to remind everyone to call in and ask you some questions. Please join us. The phone number is 650-856-1491. I'm here with Sara Hart, who's talking about her career, and we'll get to the job that she had first. So tell us a little bit what happened when you were no longer a teacher. What did you do then?
Then I went to Pfizer, the pharmaceutical company, and I was there for 20 years. I was in HR, doing training and development for the research division in the U.S., and then I worked for 5 years in the U.K. for Pfizer. Came back to the United States and resigned and moved to San Francisco and started my consulting company, Hart in 1996, and I've had that company ever since.
And I will try to repeat again all the things you do. You are a consultant, a coach, an author, and a speaker.
Correct.
Now, let's get back to your first professional job. I want you to tell us about it and what it was like and whether you liked it or didn't like it, etc.
My first professional job was as an assistant professor at Queens College, that's part of the City University of New York. And initially, I was terrified because I was 25. I had just received my PhD. When you teach in college, you have no training to teach.
That's right.
And so I walked into the classroom, and many of the students were many years older than I was.
Ah.
And I looked out, and I thought, oh, I don't know if I can do this.
So what was your first learning? We can get there right away, that you learned you could do it, I hope.
My learning was that I could do it, and that if you just stick with it and do as well as you can, it'll turn out at least okay.
And you liked it?
I really liked it after I got over the fear, yes.
You probably looked as young as your students.
Oh, I looked a lot younger than most of my students.
Really?
Yeah.
And was that difficult for you? Did you put your hair back and wear suits in black all the time so you looked older?
No, I had very, very, very long hair at that point.
Interesting.
And I probably looked even younger than I was.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay, so that's your first job.
Yes.
Now run us through what happened next.
Well, that was, I was there for 5 years, and when I came time for my tenure decision, I didn't get tenure.
Ah,
And at that point, no one in the city university system got tenure that year because there was a big cutback. And I was crushed. But that,
had your desire to be a teacher, we didn't talk, had your desire to be a teacher been pretty singular? Were you committed to that for a long time?
well, it was the only thing I knew to do.
Interesting,
I
right.
didn't know, I mean, everybody in my graduate program encouraged us to go into teaching. And they thought that it was a waste of a degree to do anything else.
Interesting.
And so I had no idea what else I would do if I didn't teach.
So you must have been devastated. That first
was.
job sort of taught you being humble and disappointment.
That's right. And the day I cleaned out my office, I went out to dinner with a bunch of people, some of whom I knew, some of whom I didn't know. And the guy sitting next to me said, "What do you do?" Like we always say to each other. And I was just ready to say, "Well, I was an assistant professor at the." But I decided not to say that. So I just sat there for a minute. And I finally said, "I'm unemployed."
Wow, that's a new identity for you, I'm sure.
And yeah, but I could see it didn't make any difference to him. He didn't care. And it was the most freeing moment, I think, of my life so far. I mean, up to that point in time. Because a lot of us grow up when we're supposed to be smart, we're supposed to be industrious, and all of a sudden, we're not those things. And it's scary.
Well, it's also scary because not only was this your first job, but a teaching career is a variation of the first job forever. You may change
Yes.
places, but the structure of the work and what you need to do is all the same. Correct?
That's right.
Okay, I want to
That's right.
remind people to please call in. I'm here with Sara Hart. We're at Ask Dr. Business in a series called First Jobs. She has been most insightful already about talking about what it was like for her first teaching position and what it was like when she did not get her desired career move of tenure. Please call in. The number here is 650-856-1491. Now let's get back to that first job. Obviously, you mentioned you didn't have any training whatsoever.
Right.
Were you ever given any feedback? Did people come and observe your class and talk about your technique, or nothing?
No, we were observed every year.
That's a good sign.
That's a good sign. And we were given feedback and suggestions for how we could do better. It was terrifying because,
Yeah.
you know, to have somebody sitting there and you would say something and do something and then you would see them write down
Oh, jeepers.
and you think, okay, I just did something really wrong. But, you know, as you go along in your career, there are many, many, many times when you're judged. And so it was a learning experience of what it feels like for somebody to be judging you.
Exactly. And again, since it was your first job, you had no other experience.
No.
When you were a graduate student, were you a TA ever? Were you ever? That's a little bit of experience.
It's a little bit of experience. I had teaching experience in that when I was in graduate school, I taught many, many classes of public speaking.
Ah,
So I had done that, but it felt very different.
and what were you teaching at Queens?
I was in the communication department teaching everything, group communication, interpersonal communication, self-communication.
And the other stuff didn't transfer to make you feel more comfortable, I guess.
No, it felt like such a different expectation level.
Interesting.
Right? I mean, I was a TA and I was teaching public speaking, and that was okay. And all of a sudden, you know, from doing that and just moving things to New York, all of a sudden I was an assistant professor at the university teaching a graduate course in group communication with much older students.
Fascinating. Now, let me talk a little bit about whether they positioned this job for you the correct way. We didn't talk about this in our preparation period. We have a caller. This is Dr. Business. How can I help you?
Good evening. Dr. Business, I have a question for your guest tonight.
Please fire that away. That'll be wonderful.
Well, I see that your guest has had an experience with her first job that may have been a great disappointment. I would like to know if she would have done anything differently in her first job.
Thank you. Your name is Robert, correct?
Roberto.
Oh, Roberto, welcome, and thank you for asking that question. I'm glad it came up.
Would I have done anything differently in my first job?
Yes, that's correct.
I might have asked for more help.
Ah,
I might have asked for more help. I didn't ask for help because I didn't want to look like I didn't know what I was doing. And there was no clear way of asking for help. I mean, you know, there wasn't.
so it was seen, asking for help as a vulnerability you didn't want to.
I thought so. Whether or not it really was, I don't know, but I thought so. And I don't even know who I would have asked, actually.
Well, that's a good typical thing to prepare our listeners and viewers. If you're in a first job, don't be uneasy about asking for help.
Absolutely.
Well, I've got you on the air, Roberto. Do you have another question you'd like to ask our esteemed guest?
No, but that's very good advice about asking for help during your first job.
I think it's a wonderful takeaway, and I think we should let everybody know that. Thank you for calling, and best of good luck to you as well.
Actually, Dr. Business, I do have another sort of question.
Okay.
If you don't get the help from the people around you in your job, is there a place you can go? Are there consultants that you can seek out that might help you in this situation?
Roberto, there might have been. I don't know what it would have been. At that point, I didn't know anybody else. Now, after I'd been there for a while, I made friends with other professors, and I got to be good enough friends, and they were all older than I was and had more experience. And so later, I could have asked them. But when I first started, when I was really needing some help, I didn't know anybody. And the only person I had spoken to very much was the department head, and I certainly wasn't going to go to him and ask for help. So now if you're in a business environment, then I think there may be more people around that you might be able to ask for help. But in a university setting, I don't know who I would have asked.
I think that's an interesting point, because my familiarity with Stanford University is they have a teachers support network, that they have
Wonderful.
people that come to help train the teachers, observe them, and give them input. So you may not have to ask for the help, but it's there for you, and they have seminars that you can attend. It's like a train the trainer,
Right.
except it's for teachers. It's the same thing and very helpful. I hope that helps you a lot, Roberto.
Well, thank you, Dr. Business. Thank you to your guest. It's very interesting hearing about her experiences.
Well, thank you, and best of good luck.
Bye.
I have another question bouncing off that.
Okay.
What did you learn about yourself in your first job? What were the major things that you were able to take away and apply to this fabulous career that you've had so far?
I think one of the things I learned, as painful as it was to learn it, that I could depend on myself to figure out how to do what I was supposed to do. That's not to say it wouldn't have been easier if I'd had some help, but I think that I gained a confidence that I could figure it out. And I think that
Well, those 5 years were worth it alone then.
they were worth it, because I think one of the things that it's important for us to learn along the way is if somebody asks us to do something that is going to enhance our career or whatever, that the answer is yes, and if you don't know how to do it, then you quickly learn.
Well, one thing that I think I'd love to have you toy with is the world of academics is always seen as not quite the real thing, you know? What skills did you take away from those 5 years, besides the personal learning that you could do something? Obviously, your interpersonal skills and your speaking ability you took with you because you may have had that already.
Yes.
But what are some of the other things that you took away from that first job that you were able to transfer to Pfizer, for example? Someone saw this in you or they wouldn't have hired you. You know, hiring a non-tenured instructor is like hiring an attorney that doesn't pass the bar. It's not an easy transition.
Yes.
So what skill set did you take away besides that?
I don't know what skills. It was all, I think it was all personal development so that I could present myself as confident. And even if even if I didn't know, I mean, I'm reminded of my very first boss wanted me to come and work with him because he wanted me to devise a performance appraisal system. And I said to him, when he was interviewing me, I don't know anything about a performance appraisal system. Well,
not only that, you never got reviewed much as a teacher either.
And so I think that he hired me anyway because I was confident enough to say that in that situation. So I think that what I mainly developed during those 5 years was confidence, because I had taken my ability to speak into the job. I don't know that got a lot of
Well,
difference.
something else that occurred to me, the concept of group dynamics.
Yes.
In human resources, you need to be able to handle teams and work with people, and that may be another transferable skill. When people asked you why you didn't get tenure, what did you say?
I said nobody in the system got it.
So it wasn't perceived as a performance problem. But I think it's an interesting, I like the concept of determination, confidence, and maybe your interpersonal strengths. Let me see if we can solicit another question as good as the ones that Roberto gave us.
Okay.
Please call in. The phone number here is 650-856-1491. I'm here with Sara Hart, who is talking about her first job, her first professional job as an assistant professor at college. And she has gone on throughout the years to become a consultant and a coach and a speaker and an author.
Right.
And I'd love to hear a little bit about the author part and how that might have helped you, and what about the book that you published and the kinds of things that you speak about now, because maybe we can relate that to your first job as an instructor.
Okay. A couple of years ago, I went through a major downsizing of my home. And it is a very difficult, painful process. For anybody who's done it, you will know that it is a very difficult, painful process. So while I was doing it, I started writing, primarily for myself, just to have an outlet. And while I was doing that, I wondered if this would be helpful to other people. And so I wrote a book about the emotional side of downsizing your home. Not the practicalities, but the emotional side.
Did you ever have a garage sale?
I did. I had a huge garage sale. I had stuff piled, mounds of stuff in the driveway, literally. And as stuff sold, friends would go in and haul out more.
Interesting.
Because
so your first technique was the emotional part of giving something away.
Right, which is very, very hard to do. I mean, it's. I've talked to several people. I talked to several people while I was writing the book, and for many people, it's really hard to get rid of things that were important to their children.
That's true.
And I talked to many people who have a box of all of the drawings that came off the refrigerator that their children had done when they were kids. And that box had to go out because they weren't going to have room for it. So I wrote this book,
Give us the title in case we
Yep.
want to read it.
It's The Upside of Downsizing, Getting to Enough. And that title is really important to me because for 20 years now, I've had a personal project called The Sign of Enough. And it's designed to help us answer the question, how will I know when I have enough?
Interesting.
And this has been really important to me because I'm concerned about what I think is our overconsumption, which I think is not good for our soul and I know is not good for our planet.
As a starving assistant professor, did any of that stuff hit you then or no? Probably not.
Not then.
Okay.
No, not at that point. No.
Okay. Now talk a little bit about what you speak on. And
I'm speaking, I'm doing book readings and book signings and have found a very, very, very nice acceptance of the book. And I've gotten emails from people I don't know telling me how helpful the book is. And so that feels really, really
now,
good.
one thing we didn't talk about was the concept of sex roles and gender as a female professor. Did you find any difference between the first job and the other jobs you had in business, or were you treated mostly equally and the same as your male colleagues?
I want to tell one story that
please.
where I was not treated the same. When I was in graduate school, I wanted to go from my master's to get my PhD, and I talked to my primary advisor, and he said my work is really good, but they couldn't spend that money on me because they had to save it for a man who would need it to raise his family.
Ooh, he would go to jail now.
He would go to jail now, and that was in the 60s. And I was really angry, but I didn't know why, because he was right. You know, so
Interesting.
that's how times have changed. I don't think that my gender affected me when I was teaching. In the business environment in the 70s and maybe the 80s, I was the only woman most of the time in most of the meetings that I attended or that I traveled to.
Even in HR, which is known as a female field?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so I don't know that things were directly done. I always felt sort of other because, you know, the guys were the guys and the guy, you know, they were being guys and I wasn't a guy. And I had no interest in trying to be a guy. And
Well,
so,
you needn't.
Yeah.
Now.
I think I was paid different.
Oh, I'm sure you were.
But we weren't allowed to talk about our salaries then.
That's right. Now talk a little bit about what advice you would give someone starting as a first job. They came to you and said, gee, you've had a great career. What advice do you want to give me on my first job ever? What would you say?
I would say look for something that you think will be fun and that you want to do and that sets you up well for your next job. Because in our day and age, you will probably have many, many different jobs, potentially many, many different careers. And so I think it's important to always look, how will this job set me up for the next thing I might want to do?
Great. I want to build on something I heard you say before that I want my audience to hear, the concept of learning. That when you're in a new job, you have really a chance to take advantage of some things you never knew before. As a former educator, I bet that helped you, but what would you tell them about the first job and what they could learn?
Well, in addition to the content of the job, I think you can learn, I know it's important to learn, and I hope you can learn, that any firm or any company is going to hire the very best technical people that they can find, technical or whatever the content of the job
specialty,
is.
right.
The difference is how well people get along with each other, how well they work together in teams, how they treat one another. And so to learn to work well with other people, you've got to learn that, because that is going to make the difference in your whole career.
And that's hard to train.
It's very hard to train, and it's some professions, the training in the education people get is opposite from team training.
Well, certainly teaching is.
Yeah.
Team teaching in a college is not very, no one wants to give up the lecture space. Well, we have about 1 minute left, and I'll do a shout out like I was the shopping network, 650-856-1491 if you have a final question for our delightful guest. And before we close down, tell people what you're doing now for more seasoned women, because I was fascinated by that as well.
My current project is working with what I'm calling Prime Spark. And it's designed for women over 55 to encourage them to stay out or get out in the world and make a difference in whatever way is important to them, and to ignore the messages we get from our culture about how irrelevant older women are.
And that note, we're going to say goodnight. I want to thank everybody for coming. Next show is December 19th. My guest is Ken Lowe, who's an ophthalmologist in the local area, who's going to talk about his first job and how he made it to have a practice that has brought him satisfaction and good cheer. I want to wish everyone a Thanksgiving holiday of wonder and grace, and thank my wonderful crew for all the effort they did tonight, and my guest as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roy.
Good evening.